is probably the segment that I am more closely related to because of my research in the field. And I still think it's also one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, because we're going to talk about the financial sector and the role of investing. We're going to talk about giving. My talk is about mobilizing wealth for social impact. We're going to talk about giving and investing. And so far, every time we spoke about shareholders, there was often a negative connotation. We started to change that a little bit with Dunia and Christos, where we started to see, okay, maybe the investment process is not all bad, and there are ways of actually having impact. But I'd like to explore a bit more this in my talk, just to introduce the concept, a little bit of impact investing, which again, we have already seen a case of. And then we're going to have a panel. We're going to have Agustin will tell us about one initiative, Gawa Capital, and then we'll bring it together with Oriol Piña and Rocío to talk about ABAC and Tutecho. So here we go. Again, this is a topic that has got a lot of attention in the last 20 years, and it's also somewhat some confusion. So we're going to be focusing primarily on impact investing, but I think it's important to understand where did this come from? So how come we are now talking about investment that can have a positive, measurable social impact along a financial return? And where does this come from? Again, you can go back thousands of years. So all major religions essentially have some rules on giving. And giving, philanthropic giving, was never meant to be an option. It's an obligation. And wealth is not yours to keep because you earned it. Wealth is a gift that you have to actually pass it on to others. This is very similar in Tzedakah, in Caritas, Zakat, whatever religion you go, look for, it's going to have very similar rules. Communities and social harmony is the goal we should achieve for. And by the way, this makes you better. By the way, psychological evidence shows that we are happier when we spend for others than for ourselves. This is a fact, well studied in current psychology and social psychology. So we know that giving is an important part of who we are as humans. And as far as the last century, this was sort of industrialized. So giving was a small activity that you did on the side. At the height of the Gilded Age, that's an interesting aspect, when the inequality was the highest in the United States and there were major concerns about the role of business and billionaires of the time in politics, one of them wrote a book called The Gospel of Wealth. So there are people in foundations here. I'm sure they're all aware of the history of where foundations come from. That's where they come from. Andrew Carnegie had the idea that foundations or ways of kind of giving philanthropically and organized, actually the word that was used later on by Gates at the Rockefeller Foundation was scientific giving, was a way so that the money accumulated by the wealthy could be used for the poor. And notice that it's very clear, it's not hiding the fact that one of the good things about this is that we might actually keep capitalism and avoid, obviously, what they were concerned about, which was, expropriation and communism. All of the major American foundations fundamentally started in that time. All the ones that have developed the many practices that foundations are involved in. But this is philanthropy. So did this solve the problem of translating wealth into social impact? Not at all. So in some ways, and I'm going to emphasize that perhaps we are closer to doing that today, the wall between social values and economic values remained. Actually, in many ways, probably from the 80s, became even stronger. So we have the world where we have government and NGOs and community and volunteers and philanthropy. That's one world. Then you go to work, and you are an investment banker, a consultant, an executive, and you follow different rules. The world of economic value, the way we measure value in economic terms, has been fundamentally different from the way we think about social value. This has been true for centuries, and the fact that we became better at philanthropy didn't solve this problem at all. I think we started getting better at it, I think from the 70s. So I'm going back, and I'll do that in less than 15 minutes, don't worry. But it's in the 70s that we have the first experiments of leveraging our investment towards a social cause. Interestingly, it's about inequality again, because it was the anti-apartheid movement in the United States, where students at Columbia University, the Episcopalian Church, which actually is very close to Columbia University in New York, and the New York City controllers and the unions. It was an interesting coalition of people that started to protest in the streets, but also see what the sign says. We don't want our pension funds to support apartheid. You have been hearing similar things about fossil fuels, about many other causes. So divestment is the word we use today. Well, this was invented around in the late 70s, actually. And again, the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility in New York became one of the laboratories where a lot of the modern socially responsible investing came from. You know, fast forward, now we have this term ESG that was created in Switzerland by an UN agency together with people in the financial sector. And this led to, again, the current principle for responsible investing. Again, the UN played a huge role here in catalyzing mostly pension funds, large institutional asset owners, in devising rules for investing responsibly. Not just investing and then think about philanthropy later. How can we transform the way we actually invest? This has had quite a lot of, I mean, it's been so successful that it created a lot of pushback, especially in the US, politically motivated. But it's still true today that a lot of the money that you might have invested with some large asset managers are already undergoing some level of scrutiny on environmental and social characteristics. The problem is most of this is risk focused. Essentially, the goal is not to have a positive impact. The goal is to reduce the risk of your investment. The goal of ESG investing is to reduce the risk that you're investing in things that will actually have lower value because the company has had major human rights violations or has been caught into environmental violation. And so it's all risk focused, yet again, it's an important development here. But impact investing, only really, the term was coined in this nice place in Bellagio on the Lake of Como, interestingly organized by the Rockefeller Foundation. So foundations here actually were very important in coining this idea of impact investing. And they put together all kinds of different people, microfinance investor, wealthy individuals, pension fund managers. And the question was, how can we get investors to put their money to work on social problems? In some ways, this is the first time that this question was really captured, which is not just how do I reduce the risk of my portfolio? But how do I actually get my money and use it to affect social change in a way that's different from philanthropy, in a way that brings back some returns? Now, this comes in many different forms. Again, we're going to hear about some of them, but we have agriculture support in Africa, microcredit in Latin America, but you have senior care here in Barcelona. This is a Spanish startup where Ship2Be Ventures and CREAS, two of the impact funds in Spain, have invested in, called KIDA. And you have big investment like Northvolt in Sweden, where many impact investors, plus some traditional one, plus the European Union, European Investment Fund, have invested to do green batteries. So all kinds of different things, but the goal is the same, which is an intentional investment that has the intention of generating that positive measurable impact and is generating a financial return. This is, of course, a holy grail. And of course, if you add another concept, which is called additionality, meaning it should be something where the traditional money wouldn't go, it gets very incredibly harder to do. I'll say something in a moment about this. This has been growing in the asset management world, but primarily, notice interestingly, foundations kind of started this, but they are not actually investing much in it yet, except the Ford Foundation and maybe the Rockefeller in the US. Many foundations are still not actually putting their endowment to work. Many foundations still operate, and by the way, the Gates Foundation, which done a lot of great things, in healthcare, Gates only started to warm up to this in the last few years. And because he said, the concept is my endowment has to make as much money as possible so that I can invest it in healthcare in Africa. This is what this is trying to change. The endowment of a university, our endowment, the endowment of a foundation, family office, everybody should think about how they are investing their money rather than just worrying about what do I do with the results from my investment. And this is generating, this sort of impact economy where, again, in my opinion, again, there's a lot of fights about between ESG investors and impact investor. I'm purer than thou, or no, I'm bigger than you. My view of this is that all of this is actually helping us trying to overcome this division, where the investment world has to be run only on financial criteria, and then the social world is going to be just done with the giving and philanthropy. This, to me, is one of the most important things that this has delivered. Do we know much from research? Again, we have always tried to bring some research ideas and findings on this topic. Keep in mind that the Impact Investing Fund lasts for 10 years. So it's kind of normal that we are starting to see some results from good quality academic studies, essentially this year. What we know from some studies is that this fund seems to be walking the talk. So they are prioritizing poorer and disadvantaged regions. They're actually taking new and emerging industry, investing in innovation. They're more patient, so they wait more for the returns. Yet they are often investing with traditional investor, which for some, it's a criticism, because some people say, oh, this is not additionality. If traditional investors are doing it, then maybe impact investors are not doing much. I don't think that's the case, but I think this is more, they are leading more traditional investment in areas where they might not otherwise do. And for the more financially geeky, technically oriented of you, the good thing about this fund is that they have a lower beta, meaning they are less correlated with the public markets, which if you are an investor who has a lot of different type of investment, that's the greatest thing to have. You actually care a lot less about the half a percentage point difference if this investment is uncorrelated with the way the public market go, because you want to have real diversification. So far, so good. And I want to just talk about one study from my colleague Romain in this department, because he has actually looked at debt, not just equity. This is not just equity, it could be debt. And in France, they did, because this is specific about inequality. So this is one of the few studies that actually has zeroed in on whether financial investment, in this case debt, can improve working conditions in banlieue. So they essentially had this matched sample where the same investment bank was giving loans to companies in the banlieues. These are disadvantaged areas. This is the definition. There is 423 of them all over France, versus a similar business in a different area. So it's a pretty well done study that essentially show that when you put your money in the banlieue, you actually get better financial results and better employment opportunity, both in terms of quantity and quality. So this is, again, encouraging that this impact investing is working, but there is still much to do, and again, we're going to talk about this in the panel. I think, again, this is the words of one of the people that was there from the beginning, in this Rockefeller Center meeting, and has been the founder of the Global Initiative for Impact Investing, the Global Impact Investing Network. And I think it's true that, again, we have done a lot, but we have probably not demonstrated scalable impact. So there is much to do in showing that this impact is accumulating and we're really making a difference. And I think part of it, at least that's my opinion, is that private wealth is still lacking. So I think high net worth individual, family offices are probably not, bringing, they're still a bit cold, probably, in moving funds in this direction. I think it's difficult to scale this solution sometimes, especially the VC types. You know, you have nice startups, but then social problems have a massive scale. How do you take a nice idea developed in KIDA to the social security system, to the healthcare system where it can address everyone? Just to give you one example. There is a project pipeline problem. You know, how many companies have this nice property, which is, again, that you can really find this social impact and profits. And I think it's very important, perhaps, to find ways, and that's more on the public policy side, to limit greenwashing opportunity, because everybody today can say, I'm an impact fund. So there is all kinds of ways in which we have to be better able to spot that. And frankly, also tax treatment and different incentives and ways in which public and private money could go together needs to be developed more. But for me, again, the one concept, again, we have been here since 9, so you might not be able to remember more than one thing, is that I think this change in investing is actually going from, it's more profound than some technical aspects, because it's really going from the John Rockefeller, quote, I was trained to work, to save, and to give. We are still trained like that. So we still think about working and saving and then giving. And instead, I think now we are thinking, this is Ronald Cohen, founder of Apax and Bridges. This is really changing the way we think about investing. Investing should not be just about risk and return. It should also be risk, return, and impact. This is very difficult, of course. This is much harder than work, save, and give, which is already very hard. But I think, hopefully, again, this is going in the direction of changing the way we think about the financial sector and the way financial actors operate. This is just an introduction, for the panel and Agustin's presentation. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of where I think we came from.